I think I have the spiritual gift of embarrassment. I remember one particular moment when I was a teenager at my youth group, and the girl that I had a crush on at the time said something to me, and I meant to respond very casually. It doesn't matter. But what came out of my mouth was, I don't matter. I was mortified. She probably didn't even notice that I said it. But the embarrassment was so deep, I can still feel it 34 years later. For me, one of the greatest gifts of doing college ministry for 7 years was that I embarrassed myself in front of large groups of people so many times that I kind of got used to it. It just didn't bother me as much anymore. I was having a conversation with my children the other day about handling embarrassments, and I told them that one of the biggest life lessons they could ever learn is the skill of being able to laugh at yourself. And it led me to an even deeper life lesson that I thought I'd share with you. I've always been horrible with remembering names. As a pastor, I used to feel so embarrassed when I met people for the second or third time and I totally blanked out on their names. I became skilled at avoiding using their names in conversations like, hey, brother, or hey, man, how you doing? But every once in a while, I would get overconfident and I would blurt out, Vern, how you doing? And my wife would kick me and whisper, it's Vince, you big dummy. She didn't really call me dummy, but I felt like it. So I used to try and hide my failure because I felt so bad about it. But then I slowly figured out if I just laugh at myself and admit my character flaw, then it won't feel like such a big deal. I'm such a dork. I can remember phone numbers, but I can't keep names straight. Tell me your name again. It's not that hard. Embarrassment feels bad. No one enjoys feeling embarrassed. But what causes embarrassment? Embarrassment comes from shame, and shame has power. In a way, shame is more powerful than fear or pain, because fear and pain come from something that happens to you. But shame is all about you. Shame screams in your ear, you are unworthy, you are unlovely, you're a big fat failure. So what's the normal, instinctive human way of responding to shame? We hide it. As soon as Adam and Eve were exposed for their sin, they hid from God because they felt shame. And we stuff the shame deep in a closet, and we close the door, and we hope that no one ever sees it. And this is exactly what Jesus was talking about in John chapter 3 when he was talking to Nicodemus. He said this, and this is the judgment, the light has come into the world, talking about himself, and people loved the darkness rather than the light because their deeds were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light and does not come to the light, lest his deeds be exposed. But whoever does what is true comes to the light, so that it may be clearly seen that his deeds have been carried out in God. We're afraid that if God or other people see the real us and the things that we think or say or do, then they would have to reject us. And that's why we spend so much energy trying to hide our mistakes and our failures. If we could just always do the right thing, then we wouldn't mind being in the light and being seen for who we really are. But there's a problem if that's the only part of our approach. And the problem is, all of us make mistakes and have embarrassing failures that we feel ashamed about. And that's what leads me to the deeper life lesson. There's another verse I learned in a counseling class back in seminary. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 10. And in it, the Apostle Paul tells us this, for godly grief produces a repentance that leads to salvation without regret, whereas worldly grief produces death. In other words, when you feel bad about who you are or what you've done, you have two choices. You can hate yourself and hide away in your shame and never find healing, or you could admit your failures and give them over to Jesus and find real forgiveness. When you try to hide your failures, that's when shame holds all of its power over you. But when you admit your faults, then you've just robbed shame of all of its power. The Bible calls this repentance. And that's what Jesus died on the cross to do. He not only paid the penalty that we owe for our failures before God, but he took our shame on himself. Oh, friends, rob your shame. Steal away its power. Build the skills of being able to laugh at yourself and repenting to Jesus. And I think you'll find that he'll give you a salvation without regret.